Hello, everyone. We will be getting started in just 1 minute as we give people some time to log in today, so just bear with us. Okay, welcome, and thank you everyone for tuning in today for the launch of our latest policy brief on small business technology adoption. My name is Claudia DeSanti. I'm the Senior Manager of Policy at the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, and I had the pleasure of authoring this paper. Before we begin, I would like to recognize that I'm joining you from Toronto, which is within the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, as well as the traditional territory of the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, lands that are now home to many diverse First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people. We know that Indigenous businesses and Indigenous people often face outsized barriers within the economy. So today, as we think about tech adoption and more generally in the work that we do as members of the business community, it's important that we reflect on how we can advance reconciliation as really a fundamental part of our economic prosperity in this province. Now, we have a short presentation for you. I will pull up some slides here. Our policy brief that's launching today is called Broken Links, Driving Technology Adoption Within Ontario's Small Businesses. And I'd like to give a big thank you to our two partners, Google Canada and the Future Skills Center, for making this work possible. I'm going to share a few takeaways from the paper, and then we'll hear from our partners, and we should wrap up by 12:30. So let's start with why this is important. We know that when businesses adopt and use digital technologies effectively, they can boost their productivity, improve their engagement with customers, reach new markets, compete, and grow. And this has always been true, but we also know that COVID-19 accelerated digitization as public health restrictions forced consumers and businesses to move online for everything from retail shopping to remote working. And a lot of that behavior has persisted even after those public health restrictions were lifted. So just looking at the first year of the pandemic, we saw an increase of 127% in retail e-commerce sales. So that's more than double the volume of retail business that was carried out online. 33% of businesses reported that at least half of their employees were working remotely in 2021, and that's compared to 14% pre-pandemic. So again, more than double. And 1 in 5 small businesses were affected by cyber attacks in 2021. So a big shift with big consequences. Let's take a look at smaller businesses in particular and how they compare to larger ones. The data you'll see here comes from a survey that the OCC conducted in fall of 2021. What we found is that 54% of small businesses feel that they are benefiting from new technologies, which is significantly less than the 81% of large businesses that feel they are benefiting. 24% of small businesses said they had plans to adopt digital technologies. That's compared to 39% of medium and large businesses. So clearly a gap in access and perceived benefits. Digitization is also less common among certain kinds of businesses. That includes rural businesses. In fact, only 17% of employers in rural Ontario said they had plans for technology adoption, and a key barrier for them is broadband, which we'll get into in a minute. But demographics also matter. When it comes to persons with disabilities, for example, we know that many forms of technology are not designed in an accessible way. So depending on the disability, that can be a very practical barrier. and businesses owned by older individuals also report lower levels of digital access. So these are just a few examples to show how experiences with technology can vary within the business community and why some of the solutions that are put forward need to account for those differences to some extent. Next, we have key challenges. So according to our survey, the three main challenges that businesses report when it comes to tech adoption are capital costs, access to skilled workers, and broadband connectivity. And the rest of our report is focused on addressing these challenges with some recommendations for policymakers. So let's start with resources, or the capital cost challenge. Small businesses, on average, have limited financial resources to procure and use digital technologies, especially when compared to larger businesses. And there are some good supports out there for them. Many large technology companies provide e-commerce marketplaces and other resources, such as Google for Small Business, which provides a number of services. And governments have also stepped in to offer programming. If you are a business in Ontario, you may be familiar with Digital Main Street, the Canada Digital Adoption Program, or CDAP. And the third one on this list is new. The province just announced it last week, actually, the Digitization Competence Center. And all of these programs provide some combination of funding, training, and advisory services. And the perception among businesses is that those existing programs have largely been helpful. But businesses in our survey said that they would like to see governments do more to support them with tech adoption. So our first recommendation is to broaden eligibility for tech adoption programs to include nonprofit organizations. We know that nonprofits contribute to the economy just as much as for-profit businesses, whether they're providing social services or employment services, or they are a business support organization. And the demand for their service has actually been growing quite rapidly. In fact, demand for nonprofit services grew by 74% in 2022 alone, according to the Ontario Nonprofit Network. In some cases, it may make sense to develop specialized programs for the sector, but often it's just a matter of making sure that they're not excluded from programs that are offered to other employers, as they sometimes are. The second recommendation is to make it easier for small businesses to access digitization supports. What we heard from businesses is that they need clarity of communications. So that means simple, consistent, and transparent information about eligibility and timelines. It should be provided in multiple languages where possible, and programs should be advertised widely. Low administrative burdens, and those burdens should be proportional to the size of funding. Reliable recourse. This includes a dedicated support channel so that a small business owner can reach out and speak to someone, and an appeals process that they can trust. And inclusivity, so specifically programming for certain underserved groups like entrepreneurs with disabilities, for example, where there may be unique barriers to access or perhaps newcomers. The third recommendation is to improve access to private capital and credit for small businesses, because government funding is important, but it shouldn't be the full solution, and it can't be. We know that financing is challenging for most small businesses, but especially for equity deserving groups. For example, with respect to Indigenous businesses, there are some unique hurdles, one of which is that the Indian Act prohibits reserve lands from being used as collateral for a business loan. So there are certain challenges that these entrepreneurs face. And overall, a combination of tax incentives, loan guarantees, and capital market reforms will be helpful here. If you are interested in access to capital for small businesses, the OCC has released another report on this in 2021. It's called Capital is Key, and you can find that paper on our website with a lot more detail on this issue. The next section that we have is skills. So this was the second largest barrier for small businesses. Small employers often can't afford to compete for talent. There's a very intense global competition for digital skills. and often they can't afford to upskill their own staff or at least do it alone. And often when we think about digital skills, we think about very technical skills like software engineering. Those skills are important, but what's interesting is that the basic competencies are often even more important depending on the nature of the small business. There's one survey that shows that 75% of employers say that the main digital skill that they need is actually experience with Microsoft Office. So we're not necessarily talking about very specialized skills here. Again, several resources exist, including the Digital Literacy Exchange Program, the Future Skills Center, who you'll hear from directly, a number of projects that they lead, and there are work integrated learning programs as well. And then more specifically, when it comes to cybersecurity training, there are a few educational resources for small businesses like CyberSecure and the Rogers Cybersecurity Catalyst. So what do we recommend? Well, first, governments should continue to develop and scale successful training programs. The key word here is successful because we do know what works. Best practices include bundling skills training with other digitization supports so that a small business can access both the funding and the training in one place. Co-designing programs with employers. We want to make sure that programs reflect the real needs of businesses, especially as those needs can change over time. Clustering employers with similar needs. So, it becomes easier and more efficient to get feedback from businesses and implement programs when you put together groups of similar employers. Offering flexibility around timing and format. Self-explanatory, but especially when you have mid-career workers that are balancing full-time work with other responsibilities, that flexibility can be very important. And last but not least, leveraging partnerships with business networks that can help improve the quality of the programs and also promote them with the right audiences. The next recommendation is to build more inclusive digital training programs. This is important to bridge the gaps that exist in our workforce and make sure that we're harnessing talent across different population groups. You can do this through subsidies. You can make sure that programs are geographically located in specific communities so that they're more accessible. And also, again, by partnering with community organizations. A good example of a partnership is the Black, African, and Caribbean Entrepreneurship Leadership Program, which is led by the Black Business and Professional Association together with the Future Skills Center, the Diversity Institute, and other community partners. Recommendation number 6 is to focus on work integrated learning programs. These are academic or educational programs that include some real experience in the workplace. And it's important to make more of these opportunities available overall, but especially for mid-career workers who would benefit from upskilling to acquire those digital skills. One way to do that is to combine work integrated learning with micro-credentialing. We also know that it can be challenging and often prohibitive for small employers to participate in these programs. So we recommend that the government provide incentives and support for them to do so, which can be done through wage subsidies or tax incentives. The Talent Opportunities Program is a good example of a wage subsidy program. And then lastly, do more to communicate information about programs that are available to small businesses that may not always be aware. Our final section is broadband, because without internet connectivity, there really is no tech adoption to begin with. The Chamber will be doing more work on the issue of broadband in the coming months, separately from this paper. It's a bigger issue that warrants special focus. But the bottom line is that Ontario needs to continue to prioritize and accelerate the rollout of broadband across Ontario. It should do more to address barriers to private sector broadband investment. Those barriers, regulatory barriers exist at the municipal, provincial, and federal levels. So a lot of work is needed to identify and address those. And then finally, to explore Dig Once strategies, future-proofing of digital infrastructure, and opportunities for better data sharing around broadband gaps. So stay tuned for more information on the broadband file. We'll be putting out some work on that in the coming months. So that's a summary of the report. Before I conclude, I just want to underscore why this is so important. And I think it's worth taking a second to reflect on the fact that small businesses not only account for the majority of Ontario's workforce, but they also add a lot of innovation, and they provide choice to consumers. Many of them play a pretty big role in supply chains, which of course have a ripple effect across the economy. And tech adoption is one of the best tools that businesses can use to become more resilient and productive. So supporting small businesses with their digitization is not just important for their own growth and that of their employees, but also for our communities here in Ontario and the broader economy. So I hope you find something of value in the report, and please feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or comments, or if you would like to learn more about how you can engage with the Chamber Network. I will now turn it over to our two guests from Google and the Future Skills Center, and we'll start with Colin McKay, Head of Government Affairs and Public Policy at Google Canada.
Hi, Claudia. Thank you very much for the overview of that work, and thank you to the Ontario Chamber and Future Skills Center for digging into what is a challenge for small businesses in Ontario, but also an opportunity. Over the past 3 years, we've all been pushed to question and challenge how we conducted business in the past. Whether you were a small retail location in a small town in Ontario, or a medium-sized or even a large-sized business that made assumptions about the market, how you delivered products, and how you sought opportunities. And as this report identifies, there continue to be challenges and opportunities for each of those types of businesses today and into the future. Many of them are complex. You've already flagged that skills and training is necessary in every type of business that the Chamber serves and that the Future Skills Center supports, and that Ontarians interact with, from that small local retail to a larger retail chain, all the way through to those fundamental elements of the supply chain. And it's every step from identifying markets, attracting customers, and then importantly making a sale, through to both training your staff and your team, but also identifying where there needs to be additional training and additional steps taken to adjust to the challenges of moving to a digitized world. We've noticed this at Google, and we've worked with partners over the past 3 years, in fact, before then, to address the training challenge in particular. You mentioned micro-credentials, both through our Grow with Google program with small businesses, but more importantly with groups like Digital Main Street and NPower. We've been trying to develop programming that not only provides micro-credentials and incremental training for Ontarians who recognize that they need to build their technical skills and learn how to integrate them into a business environment, but also that these programs serve underserved communities, overlooked communities, importantly, both urban, rural, and Indigenous communities, to open up economic opportunity for them, even as we've gone through a period of great transition. There's a fundamental challenge here as well, that we need to recognize the investment in technology, both structural across our broadband networks, as well as within individual businesses, from the simple to the most complex, as you said, whether it's workplace productivity software that's on everyone's desktop or everyone's laptop, or nowadays everyone's mobile device, through to the sort of technology that powers manufacturing and industrial development in today's world. And we recognize that that's an incremental process as well. And it demands focus and it demands commitment, but it also needs to recognize the opportunity. Even as we go through a period of high interest rates and economic uncertainty, Ontario needs to focus on the reality that we are the strongest economy in the country. We're strongest economy within a G7 country. We have a strong export market. And importantly, every piece of our economy has an interest, if not an actual exposure, to exports, from small online businesses to local businesses in rural communities in small towns across Ontario, who discovered that through digitization and online tools, they could open themselves up to markets across the province, across the country, and around the world, as well as more traditional businesses. And we think that it's essential that work like this emphasizes the relationships between small businesses, organizations like the Chamber, businesses like ours that exist to serve small business, and then importantly, organizations like the Future Skills Center, NPower, and others that create that bridge that helps small businesses not only identify opportunities, but the tools and programming and the funding that enables them to think about the future and put plans in place to prepare for it. And with that, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Colin, and completely agree with your comments there about it being an ecosystem of support. And I think often a small business can feel like they're alone, but there are partners out there, and I think we can all work together to support them. So last but not least, I'll turn the time over to Noel Baldwin, Director of Government and Public Affairs at the Future Skills Center.
Thanks, Claudia. Thanks, Colin. Thanks for inviting us to be a part of the launch of this report. It's a really impressive piece of work, and I think it highlights some really important issues. And I'll try not to just say everything that Colin just said and have a couple of original thoughts. The obvious point is that it's important to think about these issues in the context of small and medium enterprises, because they are the single biggest driver of employment in Canada. And over the last 3 years at Future Skills Center, we've heard many of the same things that the report highlights around challenges related to capacity for engaging in skills development and training with the employees of SMEs. And it's critical for SMEs to have the support to do that, because much of the digital transformation that has been underway for years now has been accelerated over the past 3 years in the context of the pandemic, and the kind of different ways in which digital skills are manifest in enterprises and firms as they try to plot their course towards that future you were just talking about, Colin, have really important and different facets to them, right? Whether it's wanting to make sure that you are adopting technology that can facilitate sales and growth in revenue, or new point of sale technology, to even thinking about the cascading set of choices about which technologies to adopt and how to maximize them. It's important that all firms, but SMEs in particular, have the support to do that. It's one of the reasons we've been so excited about the project that we've been doing with the Ontario Chamber of Commerce and some of their partners to put learning resources into the hands of their members through a digital platform that our partner at Magnet, which is based at Toronto Metropolitan University, has created and maintains. Putting those kind of resources into people's hands that they can access free of charge as they need them with their own staff to meet their own goals has been a really important part of our learning journey about working with employers in this space. And Colin, you mentioned our partner at NPower. We share that partner at NPower. They're doing great work to bring young people into some of these digital skills as well. The report also really, I think, emphasizes something that we've also been learning, which is it's really important to design from the beginning with some thinking and focus on the needs of SMEs. So as we've worked with sector partners in manufacturing and biotech and others, that's been a really important part of those conversations. And I think the report highlights as well the importance of bringing that into policy and program design, right? Whether it's the idea of bundling digital skills training with other digitization supports, or thinking about how policy and program will impact or can influence SMEs as you do redesign on things like the Canada Training Benefit. The report points to some really important ideas that I hope will get taken up at all levels of government as they think about their own work in this space. And finally, just to say, it's a core value of Future Skills Center, and really pleased to see the focus and some of the challenges to embed principles around equity, diversity, inclusion, and reconciliation in thinking about both digitization for SMEs and the skills component of it. Often enterprises that are led by folks from communities that are historically excluded from some of those opportunities, create compounding challenges, right? And pulling those apart so that everyone has a fair playing field and access to opportunities that they can take advantage of is really important. Really happy to see that featured kind of so prominently in the report. We're going to continue our work in this space for as long as Future Skills Center is around, and we've had, as I say, a really great opportunity to work with OCC and other chambers, with Google Canada and other partners in the skills development ecosystem, actors across the whole ecosystem. So we look forward to continuing those conversations and using this report as an important part of that discussion in the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Noel. Absolutely just the start of more work to come on this. Thank you to you and your team at the Future Skills Center, and thank you to Colin and Google Canada for partnering with us on the research. That concludes our event today, short and sweet. Thank you to all our attendees for joining us today. For more information about this report, other reports, and programs that the OCC runs, please check out our website, occ.ca, and take care and hope you enjoy the rest of your day.